Hello, my friend. My name is Bita Pobalozwi. Feel free to call me Bui. I am here to share health-based information and health-based research that I have access to with you. And I hope you are having a lovely day where you are. And most importantly, I hope you're having a healthier day wherever you are. In this clip, I will be discussing some of the stigma-sensitive terms that you can use in your day-to-day life and to reduce the instances where we unintentionally stigmatize others through the communication or the words that we use. So, some of the stigmatizing terms that we need to avoid, particularly if you are conducting research, these are the alternatives, the stigma-free, stigma-sensitive terms that we can use in our research to avoid perpetuating mediated health-based stigmas. I am reading these terms from the HIV Language Guide, from the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, from the US Department of Health and Human Services, National Institute of Health, National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. So this is a big guide. It's got a lot of information, but in this case, I'm specifically speaking to the research terminology that we need to avoid and to also, like I said, to reduce the instances where we generate or perpetuate stigma in communication, right? So instead of saying subject, and instead of saying research subject or patient or client, the stigma sensitive term to use in that case would be participant, research or study participant, or volunteer, right? Here's why subject is not a good term to use. Subject is dehumanizing and denotes a hierarchical system where a group of people are subject to the will of another, such as the researcher. The term does not recognize the autonomy of the individual. Not all participants are patients, particularly in research involving people who are generally in good health. Client and consumer do not typically apply to the research setting, right? So another stigmatizing term to avoid when you're conducting HIV-based research and to reduce mediated health-based stigma or the stigma that we perpetuate in communication, instead of saying experiment or experimental, the alternative word, the stigma-free term, the stigma-sensitive term would be to say clinical trial, study, novel, investigational. And here's why we don't use the word experiment. Experiment tends to evoke the image of lab mice rather than people who are participating in research. Investigational is a broadly used regulatory term that may be necessary to use in certain contexts. However, some people report investigational has a similar connotation to experimental, preferring novel instead when used, if possible. Another term that we need to avoid in research-based communication, and this is something I'm also guilty of, and I'm grateful for these guides that update language in these areas, is target, all right? We don't say target population or target a population. Rather, the alternative and stigma-sensitive word to use in this case would be to say engage a population, or we can talk about prioritize a population. We can talk about priority populations or groups. We can talk about key populations or groups. So why should we not say target populations or target a population? The preferred terms emphasize community-orientated, participatory approaches to ending an epidemic instead of paternalistic, top-down approaches. Another term that I'm also guilty of using, and I'm grateful for these updated language guides, is hard to reach populations or individuals, right? I do remember a time when I was referring to men, as the language that I was picking up from other experts was men are hard to reach populations. So in this case, this is considered a term that is likely to encourage stigma and would therefore also, if used in communication, will also perpetuate mediated health-based stigma. So instead of saying hard to reach, the alternative would be to say people who are underserved by, and insert, right? Underrepresented populations, populations experiencing discrimination, racism, or transphobia. People or person who are medically underserved or lack access to healthcare services. People or populations with low incidence, right? So here's why we are not encouraged to say hard to reach. This places the blame on the individuals and communities in question. The preferred terms put the onus on the health sector rather than communities. Naming the specific systems and structures causing the lack of engagement, such as racism, transphobia, is better than being vague about why a population is not being reached. So this is a term that is basically saying, so these stigmatized terms are saying we need to acknowledge these things beyond individuals, specific communities, so that we can also acknowledge the lack, right, of engagement as a result of things like racism, transphobia, right? These are the reasons why we need to be contextual instead of saying hard to reach populations. All right, so we will continue to discuss some of these stigma-free terms. This is a massive guide, and I'll be chopping it up into little pieces as we go. All right, so I hope you are having a lovely day. And most importantly, I hope you are having a healthier day today and wherever you are. Bye.